Welcome to this video where we'll be looking at 3D models in Clip Studio Paint. There isn't an awful lot that I can say right now without showing specific examples and usage, which is what I have in store for a couple of sections later on in this course. The aim of this particular video is mostly to introduce you to the idea of using 3D models on a canvas and show you how you can add and manipulate them around, as well as motivate you to play a little with this feature if you haven't already. I've been using 3D models since 2018 for my comic. This means I've long lost track of what exactly the default 3D materials look like, since over time I've customized and saved my own. I believe Clip Studio Paint comes with 4 default 3D bodies, 2 in a more stylized style and 2 in a more realistic style with better facial features. I'll draw these 2 on the screen so you can see the differences. Personally, I've only used and customized the ones with the most realistic features as they fit my style better. If your art style is more cartoonish, you might want to try the other ones. However, I'd argue that having more detailed facial features on a model can be a benefit no matter what your style is, since they can work as guidelines for where things should go. As you can see here on the side, I've got a bunch of custom 3D models saved up. The custom part is essentially basic body shape and proportions, and I've got one for each character I use repeatedly. Later in the course, I'll explain how you can customize a 3D model to suit your own characters best. So to actually use the 3D model, you need to go to the 3D folder in your material bank, and you drag it onto the canvas. It's as simple as that. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with 3D software. I've got some formal background and I've been working with 3D environments for years, so a lot of this was very intuitive for me. Unfortunately, I don't have any specific thing to recommend in order to get you used to this sort of thing, other than trying it out for yourself if you're new to the scene. I'm sorry it can be a little frustrating at first. I will, however, try to keep 3D model usage as simple and straightforward as possible all throughout this course. Back to the canvas. When you drag the model in, a new object layer is created. You can edit objects in it with this tool, the operation tool, while it has objects selected. With this menu, you can use these buttons for different camera movements and these ones for different object transform operations, such as dragging, sliding, or rotating. When you actually select the model, you'll see these blue circles pop up. Now these are inverse kinematics controls, and essentially they mean that you can drag these body parts around and other body parts won't necessarily mimic the movement. Generally, they're the easiest to use when you're posing a model. If you press the same area twice or select a specific body part, the blue circles give way to transform operations for the actual body part that you've selected, and forward kinematics are enabled. This means that if you change the position or rotation of these parts, their children nodes will follow. I generally only use these to tweak positions once I've had the base set. If you deselect and select a character, or when you switch between kinematics, the whole body will be selected and you can move it around like so, or scale it up and down. Moving on to the bottom menu for a quick rundown of these buttons. This one puts your character at the level of the ground, this one allows you to save a pose. CSP comes with some default poses and you can download poses from the assets store, but you can also save poses that you've created yourself by pressing this, naming them, and saving them to the 3D pose folder, as shown here. You can drag a pose from that folder through the materials box onto any 3D character model and it'll apply it to its rig even if it's not the model it was originally created for. This button basically flips the pose horizontally. This one reverts the model to its default pose. These are to reset scale, rotation, etc. This one here is what you use when you want to save an actual model after you've made a change to its shape. It works much like the Save Pose button, except you save the models to the body type folder instead. And then we have some actual settings. I tend to have this menu open when using 3D models, and in it I use the camera and the lighting tabs the most. The camera tab allows you to control the level of perspective and the focus of the perspective you want. There is no right or wrong level of perspective to use, I simply go with whatever works best for each shot. I also use the light source tab, not necessarily as a lighting reference, though that's certainly a use it could have, but more as a way to make features more or less visible depending on where the characters are relative to the light. You just drag this sphere around and it adjusts the whole scene. The Body Shape tab is where I customize the actual proportions of the models to best fit my characters, but I'll tell you more about this when we get to the character creation part of this course. And these are the basic settings that I use, not just for character models, but also for the CSP background models. Now, for backgrounds, I generally prefer to have them imported as screenshots from software like SketchUp. The default CSP backgrounds work well enough, but they're not very specific, and in general importing big files makes CSP run slow and becomes troublesome in comic pages in particular. SketchUp is my go-to because of its 3D model warehouse, where I can find models for everything, but it's a matter of preference, I won't go into detail here. In terms of actual CSP items, I sometimes download objects or part of backgrounds from its asset store, and those are generally compatible and easy to use on a canvas. Using a background or an object or a 3D character isn't all that different, you just drag them onto the canvas and use the same sort of operations that I've explained before. As a last note on 3D objects and layers in Clip Studio Paint, the 3D layer will rasterize if you do operations like flipping the canvas, in which case it'll become a flat layer and you can draw on it, but won't be allowed to revert back to the 3D editing mode. You can see that it also automatically comes with a ruler. And this is what I was talking about when I mentioned never creating perspective rulers manually, but rather letting the 3D models do it for me. If you make the ruler visible, you'll be able to use it and move it around as a normal perspective ruler. And I personally tend to add 3D objects to create these, even if I don't need the objects to begin with. That's about it for 3D models for now. In the next and last sub-chapter of this section, we'll be talking about shortcuts and a couple of other effects that I sometimes use and I think might be interesting to have in mind. See you then!